The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to have 4 distinguished members of the General Assembly with us today, all from Chesapeake. I'll start with you, Delegate Barry Knight. Good to see you, sir.
Good to be here, Woody.
Mr. Chairman, Chris Jones. Good to see you again.
Pleasure to be back.
Senator John Cosgrove. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Woody. Thank you.
Delegate Jay Leftwich.
Thank you.
Good to
be
see
here.
you. Is this your second term, sir?
Second term, third year.
Great. Tell us how things are going for you.
Going real well. I started out the year wanting to have a couple of bills. I wound up with like 15 or so. So it's a busy session. I'm looking forward to doing the work of the people and trying to streamline government and vote for a responsible budget.
Great. And how are your constituents doing back home?
As far as I know, real well. I take a lot of pride in responding to emails and taking calls and meeting with people, and they seem to be, generally happy with the way things are proceeding. But we always try to make it better.
Wonderful. And Senator, how are things going for you, sir?
Pretty well, Woody. It's my third year in the Senate. I have 5 committees this year.
5?
5.
Wow,
So I'm staying pretty
what
busy.
committees do you have now?
Well, I'm on Commerce and Labor.
Okay.
I'm the Vice Chairman of the Transportation Committee in the Senate.
Congratulations.
Thanks. I'm on Education and Health, Social Services and Rehab, and Local Government.
Well, thanks for being here, because I know that sounds like a pretty busy schedule to keep up with.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, Chris Jones, good to see you, sir.
Good to be here.
And I know you're working on the budget as we speak almost.
And we've been at it for about a month now. Governor introduced his budget last month on the 17th and have had staff hard at it. I think I'm wearing them out right now, but we'll have the budget out before the body on the 21st of February. And it's a lot of work, but we've got a wonderful set of new members on the committee. We've got Barry's on the committee. And so we've got 22 members with 8 standing subcommittees, and they work. Each one has at least 3 subcommittees. And so appropriations is probably like 2 committees when you figure the work that's got to be done.
And I know you've had a number of meetings already, including a lot of very interesting presentations. I think you have one this afternoon, do you not?
Yeah, this afternoon we've got 2 presentations of note. One is Aubrey Lane, Secretary Lane, is going to talk about House Bill 2, the funding, the way we spend the dollars in the Commonwealth on transportation. CTB met yesterday. We've also got Steve Staples, Superintendent, Public Education.
Great. And Delegate Knight, how are you doing?
Doing fine, Woody.
Good. I understand that you've got some legislation in dealing with menhaden fish.
I do.
What are they?
Well, menhaden fish has been quoted as, they haven't been quoted, but the book says.
Can I meet them?
They're called the most important fish of the sea. They're at the bottom of the food chain, and they filter a little bit, and the rockfish eat them. And anyways, we've got where it's the only fish that swims in the waters of the state of Virginia that's under the purview of the General Assembly. And I would like to take it out of the hands of the politicians and put it in the hands of the scientists. VMRC and a lot of us here have been fighting this issue for years and years, and it seems to be getting a little bit more traction this year.
So what is the MRC?
VMRC is Virginia
VMRC.
Marine Resource Commission, in that they are an appointed board by the governor, but we have to confirm them. So they go through a set of checks and balances. The scientists on the VMRC, along with VIMS, Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences, will consult with them and tell them how the management needs to be done in the state waters. Has nothing to do with the quota. That's the feds set the quota. It just tells them how they can fish these small fish within state waters.
Now you mentioned that rockfish eat menhaden. What else are menhaden fish used for?
Oh, menhaden fish, when they do catch them, they use them for bait, which is about 9% of the quota, and the other 90% is the reduction, which they use them to grind up into animal feed for protein sources, and a very small bit of it is the omega-3 oils.
Okay, great. Chairman Jones, tell us about some of the challenges that your committee faces this year, especially in terms of what was laid out by the governor.
Of course, the economy is not quite as good as one might think. Collections are a little bit behind on the corporate side. So the governor introduced his budget, and he had Medicaid expansion embedded in that, and that was about $157 million in savings. So we're not going to do Medicaid expansion. So we take that out, starting from, quote unquote, we reset it at that point. So any initiatives that were are attached to that, we're going to have to find savings or cuts to be able to fund those items. And we do have a collar on the budget, which means we're not going to spend as much as we think we might take in.
So that's a cap in essence?
Yes, it is, on the non-withholding. And when we had the
Okay.
$2.4 billion problem 2 years ago, it's because we missed tongue-tied today, on that source of revenue. So last year we put a collar on it, which worked very well. That's why we had a surplus. And this year the governor has introduced in his budget a collar as well, which is good for the Commonwealth. Makes you become more conservative in your budgeting.
Sure.
If you have extra, that's great. Then you can allocate it where you deem fit. But if you don't have enough, you got to go in and cut.
Can you explain to our viewers why the Commonwealth has to come up with a balanced budget and the Congress does not?
The Constitution requires it. So we can be thankful for the forefathers and those who've come before us, saying we have to have a balanced budget. I like to say, if we don't take it in, then we can't spend it. And you can't borrow to spend on operations. And that's why we have been consistently until the last couple of years, the number 1, 2, or 3 state in which to do business. And I attribute it to the 4 of us here and the other 136 members. While we Republican and Democrat, end of the day, we know we have a job and an obligation to pass a balanced, conservative budget that invests in the Commonwealth.
And of course, the state still maintains its AAA bond rating?
Absolutely. And we've done some things in the last couple of years on VRS, the Virginia Retirement System reforms, that the bond rating agencies like. We've done a lot of conservative budgeting with cash that we spent on capital projects instead of borrowing. And we've done just a lot of structurally balanced amendments in the last 2 or 3 years that have put us in a much better posture on not as a pay-as-you-go, because that was for the burden machine, but we do borrow money for some capital projects, but we have a process for what we do borrow with a debt advisory commission, and we know what our debt capacity is, so we live within those confines.
And of course, that AAA bond rating allows you to borrow money at a much lower interest rate.
Correct. That's sterling when you have AAA, and we're one of the original, I think, 5 states. And under my watch, we'll do everything to make sure we never lose that. And of course, the other 139 members and the governor, we take that very seriously.
Senator, I know you're involved in this Menhaden initiative. Talk to us a little bit about that as well.
Well, I carried the Menhaden bill several years in a row, about 10 years ago, and it met an untimely death in a subcommittee in the House. Barry has picked up the mantle and run with it. I've put in a Menhaden bill that does exactly the same thing. It shifted over to the VMRC. Look, Woody, I'm an electrical engineer. I don't know anything about fish. Okay, I'm not even a good fisherman. So there's no reason why 140 members of the General Assembly should be the ones who make decisions on that particular life form in the Chesapeake Bay and in the waters of Virginia.
Is this merely an accident of history in terms of when the General Assembly took jurisdiction of these fish? Or do you even know?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I wish I could tell you, but I don't. Maybe Delegate Knight might know.
Barry, do you have any idea about that?
No, I don't know, but I know I've researched back for 70
Sure.
years, and it's been under our purview for 70 years. And if it smells fishy, it probably is.
Now, you have a lot of military personnel, either active duty or retired in your senatorial district, and I know you have some legislation in regarding a real estate tax exemption.
Yes, and Delegate Knight and I both need to speak to this because he actually was the one who brought this to my attention. We have a constituent in common whose husband was killed overseas. We've passed a constitutional amendment that required that localities exempt property taxes to the spouse of a surviving spouse of a person killed in action. Unfortunately, the term killed in action under federal code means killed immediately, not taken to a hospital where they died of their wounds, but died on the battlefield itself. What our bill does, it changes that so that spouse can get that tax relief if the military spouse died of his wounds while in a medical facility.
And Barry, do you want to speak to that for a moment as well?
For sure, it's something that we gave permissive legislation for this to happen. It wasn't our intent for this to happen. This poor gentleman was in a armored vehicle, a bomb blew up, and he was just barely hanging on to life, you know, and just because of his fortitude, he lived until he got transported to the hospital. He died as soon as he got there. So we think it was just a fallacy in the definition, and we're going to try to fix it.
You know, what are the other thing that I'll tell you, having military experience, military triage and medical help on the battlefield is becoming more and more sophisticated and very effective. And so that's a good thing. But at the same time, we don't want to damage surviving spouses and their benefits because of a little click in the law.
Exactly. Delegate Leftwich, we certainly don't want to leave you out of this conversation, but I know you've been active in a lot of different areas. Talk about the kinds of things you hope to accomplish this session.
Well, kind of piggybacking on the military theme, I've introduced legislation that would allow for the establishment of a special docket in the courts in Chesapeake to deal with mental health and veterans issues. We know that Hampton Roads has a very strong military presence, and unfortunately, the battle will sometimes affect, the emotional and psychological well-being of our veterans. And so, in recognition, in the past years, the General Assembly has certainly become aware of some of the needs of mental health, and with Hampton Roads veterans population. Actually, all of us have kind of jumped on this bandwagon and are supportive of the legislation, but I just was the one that introduced it. But it would allow the court to deal with veterans and those with mental health issues in a specialized docket. Sort of like if you go to the education realm, you deal with students with certain needs in one group, and so that's the purpose behind that legislation. And then another batch of legislation I have deals with human trafficking, and it's somewhat timely, I guess.
Wasn't there a recent arrest?
There was. They raided about 10 facilities in Chesapeake and charged numerous individuals with, offering sexual services, and there was an element of human trafficking. I understand the Department of Homeland Security was involved in the investigation that lasted over a year. I did not know that was going on, but it's quite timely that this legislation was introduced at this time because it helps stiffen the penalties. There's some legislation that helps with behavior modification of those who might seek that type of industry. And so actually, I was really motivated to pursue this legislation, but the recent investigation and raid has elevated the issue and the presence, I think, of my colleagues, and I'm looking forward to some success on those bills.
So is this a serious statewide problem?
I think it is, and let me give you an example. When the legislation first came to me, one of the bills dealt with required training for school counselors and nurses to recognize students who may have been lured into that industry. And having been a former school board member, my first reaction was, well, another unfunded mandate. We're requiring you to train individuals but not giving any money to do it. And the response that I received back was, well, Jay, this is under our noses. Our school district voluntarily implemented some of these procedures, and they identified 5 students in areas that you would not think who were involved in this, who had been forced into it or lured into it. And so it is out there, and it's under our noses, and it's something that we hopefully can help deal with this General Assembly.
Great. Senator, Virginia values veterans. Talk to us about the programs that are available in the Commonwealth for veterans. Talk to us a little bit, too, about these new service centers. I believe one in Hampton Roads and one in Northern Virginia that are going to be opening up soon.
That's correct, Woody. Last year, we opened up some veteran service centers in the community college systems. And it was a great coalition between the community colleges and the Commonwealth of Virginia. Admiral Harvey was just fantastic about it. So veterans can go in there and have a veterans office right there at the campus. And we were proud to have the first one in Chesapeake. We've also put our money where our mouth is, because the VA, the Veterans Administration, everybody knows they haven't been doing their job. But we are a veteran-friendly state, and with a lot of money from the Appropriations and Senate Finance Committees, we have committed to building 2 veteran service centers, one in Northern Virginia and one in Virginia Beach. And I'm very, very proud of this General Assembly for stepping up and doing that.
So what kinds of programs are available, for example, at a community college for a veteran returning from a theater of war who happens to be a medic, for example?
Mm-hmm. Well, we also carried a bill, this was last year, that requires the community college system to go through a veteran's training jacket and see what training they had received in the military that can be set over and given credit. So you have a medic, like we were just talking about, the medicine deployed, who comes back and wants to be an EMT. Well, normally they know more than an EMT does, but they're still having to go through and get all this training. And so that bill kind of streamlines that ability for the veteran to get credits, because of the in-service training they've had. It lets them get into the workforce faster and pay a lot less to get that degree.
Sure, and I assume you have a lot of veterans as constituents as well, Delegate Jones.
I do, but to your point about the Virginia Value and the V3 program and the Virginia Values families, JLOC did a report, as you might know, last year and found that there were some deficiencies in the program, and that some of the individuals involved were not qualified to be delivering the services that they were delivering. So I've already met with the Secretary and the Commissioner on a couple of occasions, and we're going to be repurposing some of that money that the Governor has put with some language to make sure, working with JLARC, which is the Joint Legislative and Audit and Review Commission, to make sure that we are actually delivering those services by the qualified personnel to the individuals who need it. All of it costs money. Sure. I know that Jay wants to see the docket in Chesapeake across about $185,000 cost. So that's not in the budget. So that's the job that unfortunately I have, is to say no to a lot of things, because we have probably request Barry, for $10 or $12, we might have one. And
well,
so
you don't want to say no to that one, because I put it in on the Senate side.
Right. And so we get it in conference. So, so the bottom line is we have to look at all those programs that are quote unquote before us and things we'd like to do, and then narrow it down to what we can afford to do. But make sure, most importantly, we're getting value for the dollar we're spending, and also that the objective of the program is being met. And so we spend a lot of time in meetings, getting into weeds, I like to call it,
sure,
the granular level, to make sure that when we do appropriate the dollars, that we don't find out, a year or so later that, oh, we were well intended, but we didn't well execute.
What about monies expended by the Governor's Opportunity Fund?
Well, that's funny you mentioned that. I asked staff about a month ago to do a deep dive on all the programs that are out there for economic development. You've got the GAP Fund, you've got it's now called the Commonwealth Opportunity Fund. It was renamed a couple of years ago.
Right.
We've got a lot of what I call earmarked dollars that go to certain industries and certain quote-unquote businesses that might come to Virginia. We spend a tremendous amount of money. Governor's got about $140 million in new ask in this budget. Probably won't get half of that. If he gets half of that, he'll be fortunate, I think, at the end of the day. So we're going to evaluate all those programs to make sure that they're being spent as they were designed.
Okay. You're a small businessman. I know you have transportation issues in your district, although you don't have to worry about that as many of your constituents do, because you can get around by other means. But be that as it may, talk to us about some of the transportation needs in your district and around the state.
Well, one thing is, talking about our particular area is heavily concentrated with veterans in there, and we have tried to know that's over 30% of our economy in this area, but we know with sequestration we have to see some other economic development. And we have a place down that's 4,000 acres that's been designated as a mega site. It's in Chesapeake. These gentlemen have all seen it. The Chairman of Appropriations has seen it. And what opened it up was the Veterans Bridge across Dominion Boulevard opened that area up. So that's a situation where transportation is opening up economic development. We're hoping we can get a little bit of money to designate this on the state tier level as a mega site, and 4,000 acres under one owner that's cleared land, and the proximity to the port can create tens of thousands of jobs there. And this particular site was unlocked because our proximity of a port, but because of this bridge project that went through there. So there's a great example of how transportation can move people but facilitate bringing business to Virginia.
Talk to us a little bit more about the Port of Virginia and its importance, especially now because, as I understand it, the post-Panamax ships are starting to wend their way into that port, and we have a real competitive advantage in comparison to other states on the eastern seaboard.
Well, we do. We're the only area right now that can accommodate a Panamax ship that's coming in, and this Port of Virginia has not moved as far forward as it could with new infrastructure in there, because we've had some tight times around here. But now they're putting an ask into appropriations of $350 million, and we're limited on space. And this space is pretty full with containers, but with these new straddle carriers that, if we approve this bond package, will increase our won't increase our footprint, but increase the height by 50%. So this $350 million, the Hampton Roads Business Roundtable and most everybody here says that is what needs to get the port moving. And when you move the Port of Virginia, you move all of Virginia.
Doug at Leftwich, a real economic driver, I take it, in your district as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I work with a medium-sized law firm there, and many of our clients are associated with the port.
Let's draw a little bit on your background, because I know you served quite a while on the local school board. What kinds of issues or challenges still face local school districts, K through 12, for example, in your opinion?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is funding. Several years ago, because of the economy, every area of the state, whether it be schools or libraries or anything else, took a cut. Everybody, as we like to say, took a little bit of a haircut. And so, like for example, Chesapeake, most of their bus fleet is 15 years or older.
That old, 15 years?
Yes, and so they're having problems replacing buses. I have 5 children, but 4 are still in K-12, as we say. And every day you hear about a bus breaking down and another bus having to come out and get those kids and get them to school. So invariably there's a group that's 30 to 45 to an hour late for class because of the transportation issues. And it's not the roads, it's the vehicle that's transporting them. I hear the morale is kind of low amongst teachers and staff because things are tight in the school district. But at the end of the day, we all have a job to do, and what I tell them is, look, we just keep your chin up. As the economy improves, I think everybody's going to get a little bit of their hair back, and so and that's why we have Chris working on the budget, because he's a master at finding the peas under the shells and putting them in the right place.
Now, what about the reforms on standards of learning? Has that helped?
I think so. Yes, it's reduced the number of tests that the students take. We addressed a bill yesterday in subcommittee that would kind of address the length of the tests. I mean, you had third graders spending several hours on one test, and that's I can't focus on something for more than 30 minutes. So things like that I think will help us make the K-12 system better. It'll make the teachers' jobs a little bit better, less tests to administer. The other thing that we've done is adaptive learning. I think we talked about a little bit about that last year.
We did.
And then there was something else that we did in subcommittee yesterday, but I'm drawing a blank.
Senator Cosgrove, what about encouraging more charter schools in the Commonwealth? I know we only have about 6 or 9 at best, I believe.
Well, Woody, I'm a supporter of charter schools. Unfortunately, most school districts are not. They consider them competition, unfair competition. So we'll just have to keep working, with the General Assembly and adding language, either through the budget or through legislation, to try to give more opportunities for localities to have these charter schools.
And how do you see us moving away from, and I think we have a reprieve for the next 2 years because sequestration will not be imposed, as I understand, for the next 2 years, but certainly we have to encourage more small businesses and medium-sized businesses to locate in the Commonwealth. How do we do that?
Well, for one thing, Woody, we need to expand our scientific base. Virginia Beach is doing a good job trying to bring in biomedical companies, trying to get incubators for that technology. Certainly, we are one of the go-to spots in the country for modeling and simulation. We need to grow those technology businesses. you're right, sequestration is going to continue. And we've got to be ever vigilant to expand our economy away from the DoD military dollar to the private sector dollar. And I think that working together regionally is the best way for us to approach that, because any large employer that comes in is going to float all boats.
There's no question about that. Delegate Jones, talk to us about funding for our junior colleges and for our institutions of higher learning and what's happening in terms of the budget.
Well, first I'd like to go back to Jay's point. The governor did put in for K-12 a fair amount of new money, but they came with strings attached. There are 4 items that are included: VRS 100%.
That's the retirement system.
Yes, sir, retirement system pay raise, new teachers, new slots 2,500, and then I'm like Jay, one escapes me, at risk. They all 4 require a match. So what we're looking at, I've got next week Superintendent from Chesapeake coming up for the Appropriations Committee a week from today, and he will be presenting and talking how what we're looking to do in the House is to give them more flexibility, to Jay's point, because as he explained to me, Superintendent, school divisions approached and attacked the issue of reduced funding differently from 2010 until now. Chesapeake, they got an issue with buses and capital. So it's prescribed as to what you have to do, and you have money you have to match to get it. It really imposes probably a hardship on those school divisions and superintendents. So we're going to try to give more flexibility in the House anyway. Hopefully the Senate will go along. As far as higher education, we're working with trying with community colleges on workforce development, certifications. As John mentioned about, a veteran coming out half the time. If they're a paramedic, can they get their EMT or paramedic certification half the time? So we're looking to continue the investment in all across the waterfront with all education, K-12 and higher education.
Great. Barry, in our remaining moments, I'm going to give you the floor, believe it or not. I know you serve on some other committees, so what matters of importance are you working on your other committee assignments?
Oh my goodness, well, I'm on agriculture because I'm a farmer, and I'm, subcommittee chairman there. I'm on general laws, I'm on rules, and I'm on appropriations. And appropriations, the chairman has me on 3 subcommittees, education from K through 12 all the way through higher education, but he also has me on ag and commerce and technology, and I really enjoy that. And the thing that I'd like to say is truly we get along so well together. So I think Chesapeake is very well served by us serving on all kinds of different committees with the House and the Senate, and we can all take a big shotgun approach there. But we meet from time to time, we're good friends, and we're going to move Chesapeake forward.
Thank you for being here, Jay Leftwich, John Cosgrove. Who are you? Chris Jones and Barry Knight. Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I am Woody Evans.